Hello, this is Jim Copple with the Legacy Project. When I was growing up, sports were a big deal in my house. My father loved sports. He loved to watch sports. He loved to watch his children play sports. He wanted one of his sons to be a football player, and fortunately or unfortunately, that burden fell on my shoulders. So I planned to go out for football my ninth grade year at Ruskin High School. But to do that, the coaches insisted that you run track the spring before. So at my junior high school, at Baptiste Junior High School in Hickman Mills, Missouri, I went out for track. I had this illusion that the 220 was my event. And I also discovered in track that if my mother drove members of the track team to away meets, then I would get to participate. If she didn't drive, I didn't get to participate. And so I convinced my mother that she should drive us to away meets. And so on one particular meet at Center Junior High School, my mother had driven, and the 220 had already been happening or taking place. And the football coach or the track coach came up to me and said, "Can you run the 440?" And I said, "Coach, I do the 220." And he goes, "Well, it's only twice as far. Surely you can do this." And so I was excited, and I went up to the starting blocks. The coach came up to me and he said, "See this guy over here? His name is John Beeson. He's probably the fastest guy in the district. Your goal is to stay close to his hip pocket. Don't let it out of your sight. Just stay as close as you possibly can." I was so excited because Debbie Blackburn, the eighth grade love of my life, was standing over there as a cheerleader, and she was watching and seeing me about to enter this race. Well, the gun went off, and I was following John Beeson very closely. We got around the first corner, and I was right in his hip pocket. We get to the second corner, and all of a sudden I feel this gust of wind hit me in the face, and I saw John Beeson's pocket get smaller and smaller and smaller as he went further and further away from me. I got to the 280 mark, and I stopped. I quit. And I walked across the field, and I could hear the coach going, "Where's Copple?" And I tapped him on the shoulder, and I said, "Coach, here I am. I just ran out of gas. I couldn't finish." And then he said something to me that probably no coach should say to a kid. He said, "Son, you're going to be running that race the rest of your life because you quit. You did not finish." And now those words stuck with me for a long time, that I had quit and I had not finished. In fact, that became sort of a moral lesson and a legacy for sure in my life that I kept before me, that I never wanted to quit or give up ever again. As I was raising my two daughters, I would tell them that story over and over again whenever they wanted to quit something or they wanted to not be engaged in something and then end it prematurely. And so I would be telling that story over and over. Well, as my daughters got older, I did one of those things that we do to our kids. I took them to Kansas City, and I'm driving them around the community where I grew up, showing them the houses where I was raised and the schools that I attended. And we drove by Center Junior High School. And I said, "Girls, this is the junior high school where I quit the race." And Jamie, my oldest daughter, who was then 16 years old, she said, "Dad, let's go see that track." And so we walked over to the track, and she said, "Dad, you have your tennis shoes on. Why don't you finish that race?" I said, "Jamie, I couldn't finish it when I was 13 years old. What makes you think I could finish it now?" And she said, "Listen, you have your tennis shoes on. Just go over to the place where you quit and just do a slow jog around that final corner until you complete the race." And Jessica, who at that time was about 11 or 12 years old, she said, "Yeah, Dad, and I'll be Debbie Blackburn and I'll cheer." And we all laughed, but I went over to the 280 mark and started the slow jog around that track until I finished. The girls had laid out a belt across the ground, and that was the finish line. When I crossed the line, they cheered and were exuberant and happy that I'd finished the race. But Jamie came up to me, as only a 16-year-old could do, and she takes her finger and she pokes me in the chest and she goes, "Dad, you finished the race. I never want to hear that damn story ever again." We all laughed, and I don't think I ever did tell that story again, but they did, and they reminded me of finishing the race. I think in my personal life and my professional life, I've taken every step I possibly could to be sure that I finish the race. That whatever job or whatever task is before me, that I don't quit, I don't give up. That's a legacy that I inherited from that coach and from that experience, one that I taught my daughters, and one that my daughters carefully reminded me of as I finished the race. This is Jim Copple with the Legacy Project.